How are you doing? Welcome to BERNINA Canada Live on Facebook. I'm Adrienne Gallagher and really pleased to be with you again today in our home sewing hub. It's been a busy week here at BERNINA and getting a little punchy, but today we have a great topic for you. The topic is sewing with knits. So specifically some tips and tricks for how to have better performance sewing with knits on your sewing machine. We will touch on sergers, but only briefly at the end. But some of us do get a little bit intimidated about sewing with knits. And of course, these are the fabrics that we use in our daily life, in our sweaters and t-shirts and undergarments and swimming suits and jogging pants and pajamas, and everybody wears knits, so we should be able to sew, repair, and create with them. So welcome everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day. Do let me know where you're watching from so I can say hello to you. And if you like something that you hear today, give us the thumbs up so we know that our tips and tricks are well appreciated, and we'll keep doing these great videos for you. So I'm just going to make sure my feed is live and I'm not talking to the air. I'm sure I am. What else is happening at BERNINA Canada? Well, we have some new machines coming in. We have the Q16. I've unboxed one of those at work, and we're doing a great live video next Friday about the Q16. So that's sort of our smaller long arm machine. It's available in 4 different tables, and hopefully you'll tune into that webinar. I'll send the link out today so you can see how to attend that webinar. All right, so back to knits. I'm going to talk to you about knits. See how everybody's doing. Looks like everybody's fine today. All right, Sarah, we'll zoom into the machine and I'll show you some things you might need for knits. I can't see the comments. I'm trying. All right, so what special equipment do you need to sew for knits? I would really recommend some specialty needles. I'll show you those. So here's one that's labeled Jersey. So these are more of a ballpoint rounded end needle, and they sort of go between the fibers rather than piercing the fibers. So a Jersey needle is great to have. And oh good, I'm glad everybody's tuning in. That's great. Hi Edith, hi Diane. I'll speak up. Okay, good to know. So Jersey needles are great to have. This is an assortment of needles, rounded tip, so I won't get holes in my t-shirt or my sweatshirt when I'm making them. Another great option for sewing with knits is a microtex needle. If you're getting skip stitches, you might want to try a microtex needle. A universal needle is just fine. It will work just great, but if you are getting little thread slubs, fabric catches, skip stitches, try switching to one of these specialty needles. And of course, stretch needles would be great too. I don't have a stretch single needle, but I have 2 stretch twin needles. You can do twin needle sewing for sure on knits. We did a little bit of that a couple weeks ago. So great. Bonjour, Linda. Comment ça va? I know she's well. She's such a great lady. All right, so you just need maybe some stretch or ballpoint needles. That will help a lot. Today I'm going to sew with a universal needle just to show you that you don't really need it. You need a sewing machine. I prefer sewing with a sewing machine. Specialty feet. You don't really need specialty feet. I'm just using the regular foot that came with this nice machine, the B77. This is a Bernina sewing machine. If you like, you can use a walking foot. If it's slippery or difficult fabric, you can certainly use a walking foot. I wonder if anybody has tried sewing with knits with a walking foot. Let me know if you have. Another great time to use a walking foot is with slippery knits like minky or chenille or stuff like that. But you could just use your regular foot. I think it's great. And let's show you a couple different stitches you can use for this machine. So let me show you what we've got here. So this is just a regular t-shirt knit. It's a medium weight. And let's just pretend we were going to sew 2 pieces together, like a seam. So how could we do that? We could do that with straight stitch. Sure, let's try it. I'm excited. All right. This is kind of a top of the line Bernat for us, a mid-priced machine. And I'm going to just do straight stitch. Here we go. All right, well that came out really, really well. I went a little bit curvy, but that's me. You can see there's a little, maybe a little bit of a wave in the fabric, really not very much. You could address any wave in there. This is incredibly flat. But sometimes with knit fabrics, we tend to push and pull the fabric, and that will give us a lot of ripples in the fabric. You could address that a little bit by changing the presser foot pressure, so how hard this foot is pushing down on the feed dogs. You could lighten the presser foot pressure. That would probably help a little bit. But this looks really great to me. This is a very strong seam. Let's open it up. Here you go. That is a nice strong seam. It doesn't have a lot of give in it because I used a straight stitch. So there isn't a lot of give. So when I'm pulling this over my body, if this was a sleeve or a shoulder, this could pop. So straight stitch is not the best stitch to use on a sewing machine for sewing knits. I would go for a zigzag. Let's take a look at a zigzag. Hey Sharon and Nancy, nice to see you, and Cindy and Ray and Kathy and Pat. Oh my gosh, everybody's checking in. Great to see you guys today. Ladies, gentlemen, everyone, sewing friends. All right, so let's go look over at the sewing machine screen. And like I said, this is a Bernat sewing machine, but it's almost exactly like a Bernina. Looks very familiar. So a better stretch stitch might be the zigzag stitch. And you just want a really narrow stitch. So I'm going to change this to, I'm going to change the width. I'm going to start with the width, and I'm going to change that less than 2. I'm going to go with about 1.6, I think is what I liked last time. Yeah. And then I think the length is a bit long. I'm going to push that together a little bit. Okay, today I decided I'm doing 1.6 width and 1.2 length. And if I really liked this setting, I could probably save it in my favorites if I had a Bernina, but this is a Bernat, so it doesn't have that feature. So I would write it down. Oh my gosh, it does have it. I could save it right there, Sarah. I could save it. There we go. Okay, if I loved that, now it's saved. Okay, so tomorrow I have those settings. Great. So let's look at what the zigzag will look like when we sew. Let's sew that out. Here we go. Oh yeah. Okay, this stitch came out really great. Nice and even, and it's got a bit of stretch. Yep, a bit more stretch to it than the straight stitch. I'm going to open it up so we can see what it looks like. Yep, it's a really well formed stitch. This is what I would use if I was making a t-shirt or leggings or something like that with knits on my sewing machine. Very easy stitch. Everybody's got it on their sewing machine. It's got that give to it, and look, it makes a really nice flat seam. Now the great thing about knits is that they don't ravel, so you don't really have to finish this seam anymore. You could just leave it the way it is, but I'm going to show you some seam finishes in a minute. Let's test one more stitch. On most machines, I'm going to go back to the screen. On most machines, you have a super stretch or a stretch stitch. Try saying that 5 times fast. But super stretch, let's look at that. Usually it's in the utility stitches, and ours on our Bernina and Bernat is usually number 11 or 18. I'm going to go with number 11. And you can see it looks sort of like a lightning rod, lightning strike, something like that. And that's exactly what you want, because it's going to give the give in the stretching of the fabric. Cool. Let's check it out let's sew it out. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and sew it out. So this is super stretch. This is a super stretch stitch. So you can see it looks a little different than the zigzag. It's more of a angled zigzag. It's got some stretch and it's very, very narrow. It's extremely narrow, only less than 1 millimeter wide. And when I open it up, it gives a really nice flat seam, nice and stretchy. I think that's a great stitch too. So if you have super stretch on your machine, I would use it. If you don't, you can use a zigzag. If you prefer zigzag, you could go with that. All of those are really great options for stretch stitches. And then you could just create your t-shirt, your yoga pants, your sweatshirt, whatever it is, and you can leave the edges raw on the inside if you like that. It's totally up to you. And I probably would because I'm in a rush most of the time. So you could definitely do that. If this was a hem, you could sort of cut closer to the edge of the fabric and reduce some of this bulk. So let's take a look at a couple of other options that you have on your sewing machine. I'm going to go quickly back to the screen and I'm going to get Sarah to take a look at something else here. So on the screen, you'll notice there's some other utility stitches, and these would be great for stretch fabrics or knit fabrics. So something like this one that's going to create 2 bars with a zigzag in between, that's a really great one. Here's another one that sort of approximates an overedge seam. So that's a really good one. There's another one. Let's try that one. I'm going to sew that one. I'll show you if I was making a hem or a seam. Let's make a seam. I'll show you what this one looks like. All right. And of course, if you were making a seam, you would back tack and tie a knot and all that. So you could use this as a seam and see how nice and flat it is. And I'm going to grab my scissors. They're right behind me. And you would trim away the excess. And I'll show you how nice this seam turns out. You could just trim it away, not cutting the stitches, but right up to the stitches, right? And then this would be in the seam. I'm going to flip it over. There. That's your finished seam. And this would be really nice. I mean, knits don't really ravel. I can try to get a little bit of it off. But you can see how that would protect the edge really nicely there. It's a really nice finish. Looks really good. Awesome. I see Celine and Sandy and Janet and Aileen and Carol have joined us. So we have lots of friends here today. So that's another great stitch you could use to join 2 seams together. Remember, and you get a totally beautiful finished seam on the front. I'll show you one more of these. Let's go back to the screen. I tested a bunch of them that I really liked. I think it was this one. I'm going to try this one. This is a really nice one. Really approximates the look of a serger. I'm going to do it here. Cool. Here we go. We'll stitch this one out. Hey Dawn, hey Janet, we're just sewing with knits today. I've got some tips. All right, so this one sewed just like this, makes a really nice flat seam. You can see how nice and flat that is. That would make a great seam for a bathing suit or a tracksuit or anything like that. And again, you would just trim away the excess fabric. And you'd have this makes a really nice soft seam. I do like this seam. It's got lots of stretch in it, right? This would be great for a shoulder or a side seam or a sleeve. You could definitely, there's still lots of stretch in that. Now, some people buy stretchy threads. I just use polyester or cotton thread, whatever I have on hand, but there are some new stretch threads. Maxi Lock is one I can think of. There's another one. Those are really great if you're making a lot of stretch projects. You can certainly buy the stretchy thread. It will help a lot with your project. So yeah, definitely try out those stitches on your machine. Another thing I wanted to show you is why don't you use a decorative stitch to finish the seam? I'm going to show you a book that really inspired me. I left it over here. Here it is. All right, so this is Alabama Studios. Hopefully some of you have heard of this by Natalie Channon. She is, she's got a company called Alabama Channon, and she's in Alabama. And they focus on making their own knit fabric, and they sew everything by hand, which is super duper inspiring, but not anything I'm going to do. So I've been researching in her book, and what can I do to take to the sewing machine? All right, well, here are some ideas. So at Alabama Channon, they like to use decorative stitches for their seams. So feather stitch, that's one that most of us quilters know all about. And also herringbone stitch. A lot of our sewing machines have these stitches. What if we used those for sewing knits? That would be really exciting. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you another example before I get excited. Here it is. I'm going to shift this over. Sorry, Sarah. Can you see this rosebud stitch? That's done by hand. And also the chevron stitch. We have very similar things on our sewing machine. And we could use these as decorative seaming, decorative hemming stitches. Why not? Let's try it, okay? I'm going to move back to the sewing machine. So that was Alabama Channon is the name of that. Yeah. So I'm going to use another piece of fabric, and we're going to pretend that this is the edge of our t-shirt here, right? This is the edge of our t-shirt, and we're going to hem it. So I'm going to turn up the edge, and I'm going to make a decorative hem. All right, so let's try it. Let's go into quilting stitches. And remember I said that at Alabama Channon they were using the feather stitch. We have that in there somewhere. Sure, I can find something similar. Actually, I can find exactly that stitch. It's right there. All right. And almost every Bernina has a feather stitch on it, some variation of this. So let's take a look. Hey, Ellen, I'm glad you checked in. Yeah. Paul is asking, would these techniques also apply to fabrics like spandex? Yes. Spandex is just a specialized knit with lots of lycra, so you could definitely use it on spandex. I would try it. I would definitely experiment with it, yeah. So this is feather stitch. Let's see what that looks like. Hey, Joanne. Thanks for checking in. We have now we've made a hem with a decorative stitch. So you can see it's stretchy. It's very stretchy, right? I picked one of those sort of back and forth or loop-de-loop type stitches that I was inspired by my reference book. And this is making a really beautiful hem. And again, I would just trim away this excess fabric and I'd have just a most gorgeous t-shirt at the end. Isn't that cool? I think that's the best. I'm definitely going to add some details like this. And if you did it tone on tone, remember we were talking about heirloom stitches over the last few months. If you did this in a tone on tone, it would look really vintage inspired. It would look very heirloom. I've picked this so that you can see it very well on the screen. But by using contrasting fabrics, we're adding another design detail to our work. So that's one idea. You could add a decorative stitch like that. I'm going to show you another one. I'm going to go back to the screen again. Hopefully you're not getting too dizzy. In the quilting stitches, there's more options. I had like a loop-de-loop one that I really liked. no, that wasn't it. I'm gonna go look in the decorative stitches. Oh, I wanted to show you these cross stitch. A lot of the Berninas come with these heritage cross stitch stitches that I just don't know when to use them. And I was experimenting today and I thought they looked really great. So I'm gonna choose, I wouldn't choose this one because it doesn't have a ton of stretch, but I'm gonna try this one. This one looks like it would have more stretch for me, right? So I'm gonna try that. Janice is asking, where is a good place to buy knit fabrics? They're so hard to find. So a lot of quilt stores have branched out to carrying knit fabric. I live in York Region, so in York Region, that sewing place in Newmarket has a good selection. I know out west, a lot of the stores have a good selection and will send by mail. And there's also a great company called Blackbird Fabrics, and that's a Canadian company out of Vancouver, and they sell awesome knit fabrics. But I found, Janice, that more and more knit fabrics are coming to the stores. Hey, Linda. Good to see you. So here's another way you could certainly make a decorative hem. I think you can pick that up right there. And again, look how stretchy it is, right? I picked something that kind of doesn't go back and forth on itself too much, but this will give stretch. I can put this sleeve over my arm. I can stretch this over my head. That's gonna work. So definitely you always want to experiment with any new stitch on a new fabric, right? Because you don't know if it's gonna work or not, and test that your needle is gonna work and stuff like that. Now, if you found that the stitches were falling too far into the fabric, you could certainly add a little bit of wash away stabilizer. My stabilizer has left, but you could put a little piece of wash away stabilizer in there. Trim away the excess when you're done, and you could certainly wash it. Kathy, you and I are thinking the same thing. That's so funny. Yeah, I did an experiment today and I really liked the OESD wash away stabilizer. It worked really, really well. And you know, if you're an embroiderer, keep those scraps. You can just use those scraps to for these little seams. I did a little experiment today, Kathy, and I found that it did kind of keep the stitches up out of the fabric a little bit more, and it would certainly wash away very easily. So yeah, that was really easy to do. So definitely try that out. Yeah, Linda has a couple of Bernina sewing machines, both new and old, and she loves them. And my old machine can sew these really well. My 830 can sew these. My 480. I don't. These Bernina machines can really definitely take the knit fabrics. What a definite benefit to Bernina machines is most of them have the presser foot pressure you can change. For some of them it's a dial, but actually if you look on the screen, this machine is very much like my 480 and other machines. You can decrease the presser foot pressure right here. It looks like a weight weighed down on a foot, and if you select that, you can increase or decrease the presser foot pressure. And usually what I like to do is adjust it by 5 to 10 units at a time. That just seems to be enough of a difference that I can see if it's changing the output of my stitching. So for example, if I found this was stretching too much, I would change this to 30. I'd probably go to 30 and see if it made a difference and then tweak it from there. But honestly, my results are perfect and I didn't make any adjustments right now. I'm really quite happy with the way this machine handled that. So the other thing I want to show you, I'll show you another stitch while we do this. There's so many of your decorative stitches would be appropriate for this. It would be really, really fun to try different stitches. I just can't remember the one. I played with a couple today that I really liked and I wanted to show you. Why don't I make notes? Anybody know why I don't make notes? I'm not sure. But there's lots and lots to choose from that would work, right? Like This would be great. Let's use that one. That looks great. I'm going to use that. Okay, so instead of hiding the seam, why don't you show the seam? So this is the hem that we did. But you could imagine if you had two pieces of your t-shirt. So maybe this shirt, maybe this is the front of the t-shirt and this is the back, and this is where we're joining it over the shoulder. You could just overlap your pieces like this. Boop. And then join them using a decorative stitch rather than just traditionally seaming them, you know what I mean? So let's try that and see how it looks. So Linda just asked a great question. She said, would you put the stabilizer on top or underneath? So either or. In embroidery, we would put some stabilizer on top to kind of lift the stitches up. I just didn't want the stabilizer to be too much caught in the stitches, so I put it underneath because I knew I could really trim it away really well. But you could do either or both, Linda. It would work well either on top or the bottom. All right, so here's my decorative stitch. So this is now on my shoulder seam. Isn't that awesome? Again, you could leave this excess fabric here because it would kind of curl and just add more texture. That's one look, or you could trim it away and make it more even. The other thing is if this was a seam for the shoulder, that's taking all the weight of the fabric down. So this is where a lot of patterns would recommend that you put in some tape. It's either a clear tape or you could use twill tape. Or you could even just put in a strip of selvage fabric, or just another piece of selvage wouldn't stretch very much, but you're trying to support this seam. I often just put in an extra layer of the fabric that I'm using to kind of help stabilize that seam, or if I have the plastic tape, I'm out of my plastic tape right now. But if you look at a ready-to-wear garment in the shoulder seam, you'll often find that supporting tape. Or you could leave in a little bit of cutaway stabilizer, like a poly mesh. That would probably support the stitches very, very well as well. Yeah. So, I mean, most of the stuff that you need for sewing with knits, you already have at home. See how stretchy that seam is? That would stretch just fine to get that over my neck. This would make a great binding of a neckline. You could definitely do that. So there you go. Great. Well, it sounds like you guys are ready to go try stitching with knits on your sewing machine. You could definitely do twin needle sewing on it. Remember, we had a whole video on twin needle sewing. That would be, if you don't like twin needles, you can just sew a straight seam. And then remember to, I'm just going to go back to straight stitch. It's here somewhere. You could do straight stitch, sew out your seam, and then just move your needle position over. See how I'm moving this over? And sew it a second time if you're not excited about using a twin needle. So you could definitely do that. Yeah, lots of great tips for sewing with knits today. And then the last thing is, if you're sewing really stretchy items, bathing suits, underwear, stuff with lots and lots of lycra in it, honestly, I don't love sewing that on my sewing machine. Totally doable, totally doable. But this is where a serger is a really great item to have. So I'm just going to flip over to this serger to show you what I mean. So I'm just going to switch. So this is a Bernette serger, and I think a serger is a great thing in everybody's sewing studio, whether you sew garments, home dec, quilting, crafts, bags. A serger is a really great thing to have. This is our sort of entry-level Bernette serger, and it handles knit fabrics like a dream. So sometimes I like to make leggings or something like that. You can make leggings in an hour on this sewing machine, on this serger. It just handles the knits so easily. It's going to be loud because it's on my really terrible IKEA table. Sorry about that. All right. So see how great that stitch comes out? It's just, I mean, overlockers and sergers are really kind of built with knits in mind. It's really nice and stretchy. Everything is covered over and the seam is really, really strong. So if you get a chance to try out a serger, that's a great thing to do. Maybe you get into a joint sharing agreement with your sewing buddy and share a serger. But if you ever get a chance, a serger is a great thing to have. We're going to have some more serger projects coming up in the next few months. And other than that, are there any last minute questions? I think we've caught up on all the questions. That's great. If you missed any of the tips and tricks, do check out the replay. And of course, you can share this link with your friends. I'll post it on YouTube tonight as well for our friends that don't watch on Facebook. So again, thanks so much for joining me and letting me share some of my tips and tricks sewing with knit fabrics. I'll be okay. I shouldn't have had that second coffee. Have a great day sewing. Try something new, and we'll see you next week. Bye.